Welcome to the KINEXON Sports Tech Talk. My name is Amina Andau and I'm very happy and honored to host this session today. And I think we all remember this summer, the Euro, this tournament in women's football, where we all cheered with the different teams, and we all have in mind this thrilling final between the Lionesses and Germany. The Lionesses won this final, and this tournament in general, it set new standards and records were broken, and I think this hype created from this tournament also transferred to the German Bundesliga, for example. So we have increasing interest of women's football in Germany, and we have also increasing numbers of spectators going to all these matches. And I think, like, some people who are not in the sports industry, they think maybe this happened kind of a sudden and that it wasn't a big development, but actually there's a lot of hard work behind it and a lot of dedication. And today we want to talk about these developments, especially regarding sports technologies and athlete data. So I'm very happy that we are here in this round today. And I will introduce first Jana Hubel, who is a sports science consultant at KINEXON. So hi, Jana. Good to have you here. Then we have Sven Gruel, and he's the assistant coach of Union Berlin's women's team. They are playing in the 3rd division in Germany, Regionalliga Northeast. And last but not least, we have Max Schmidt, who is the co-founder of KINEXON Sports Media. So I'm happy that you're here today. And I think we will start with the first and kind of general question, just about how you see the process of professionalization in women's sport in general. So Jana, maybe you can start.
Okay, so yeah, I think we all see that it's becoming more and more professional in women's sports, and also like the technology side is like growing here. So we're gathering also in women's sport more and more data to find key performance indicators, so the perfect stimulus to, yeah, or what is the metric that the players perform at their best. So yeah, we also see that also the media attention is growing, as you said. Also maybe the staff in the teams is growing. So yeah.
It's kind of interesting because we also have like different fields of expertise in this round. So maybe you can also add something, Sven, because you're working as a trainer, as a coach. From your perspective, what did change in the last years?
I think the most important perspective, which is still very important in women's football, is the player's perspective. And we have to talk about everything starting from a basic salary, where players that do have a lot of effort that they put into performing on the field, but are not really capable to make a living in the 1st or 2nd league necessarily. And I think that's just general respect that the players should be getting, in my opinion. And when it comes to, let's say, the off-the-field side, where technology is one part, where we talk about physical development, where we talk about athletic development, where we talk about medical attention, medical expertise. I think women's football is unnecessarily behind men's football in those regards, and I think technology will play a big role, because technology is obviously gender neutral. It doesn't matter to any of the KINEXON equipment or any other technology if they will be applied to a man or a woman. So I think that's one side where a better balance can be achieved, and I think that's very, very important for the players, and that's kind of the perspective where I come from.
Super interesting, and maybe Max, you can jump on this, because you founded KINEXON in 2014, and what changed in that period of time?
Mainly the utilization of technology. And 8 years ago, when we started, we had with FC Augsburg men's team our first innovation partner. And I remember that nobody of the players really cared about what we were doing. It mainly was the coaching staff that said, hey, here's some new technology that we believe as a coaching staff will help us to analyze programming, practice and game performance. And then everyone just said, okay, we will do that. And back in the day, we had about 1/3 of the German Bundesliga utilizing that kind of technology. Today, 8 years later, we have every team having that kind of technology. And we also see now a growing demand in women's team requesting and asking that kind of technology, because obviously for us that is an effect of that professionalism that we're seeing, that structure's getting more professional, the coaching staff is better equipped nowadays, the education of the coaching staff is more tending towards technology, and this can be seen in the numbers of the 150 teams that we're working with. We now have over 30 teams that are women teams, that means 20%. 6 years ago, we had 0% women's teams, so that is a trend that we see. And Germany was not the first market here that was coming out of the woods. We had our first team was the Swedish national team in handball, and Stanford University with women's basketball and volleyball. And we're really happy that now also Germany, the football society really tries to be a bit more tech savvy than it has been in the past, and the trends we believe is going to continue.
So we see like technology plays a very important role in sports right now, but maybe Jana, can you specify what added value it brings?
So regarding the sports scientific side where I come from, it brings a lot of value regarding the load and the training management side. So you gathering objective data. So at first you can kind of prove is my feeling right, or is the coach feeling right? Then you have the data, how fast did the players run, how far, how high was the intensity. So the team is, or the coaching staff is able to plan. So I don't know, match day -4, the intensity should be higher than match day -1. So here you have the objective data, and you can check if it worked, or if we do some sprints at the end of the training, or I don't know how big the field is in a small game at the end of the training, for example. On the other side, you also can compare your match data, what is like your 100% to the training. Is the team or the players, are they able to implement the train things and performance in the matches? But there's also the other side of like scouting. If you think of like the academies using maybe also the systems, so you can see are they at their best performance, so they can come to the first team, or which of my players who will perform in the match, who not. Also regarding the injury side, it's the same. If a player comes back to injury, does this player meet their values from before the injury? Is he or she able to come back and to perform in the match again? So there are various a lot of points where you can use the technology.
And a lot of examples, and maybe Sven, you can also add your perspective, because it's a part of your daily work.
Yes, indeed. I have to think that the first thing that comes to my mind is we supply our players with the data from the matches. And one thing they really like and they request is the heat map from the match, the different areas of the field that they were most active in. And for me, the heat map is a part of technology that I find interesting, where as a coach, I don't really gather too much information from a heat map, because a midfielder I know will be more in the center and maybe will have some trips to the wing and will be up front and in the back. But it's something that's kind of flashy, colorful, and impressive for the players. And I think in terms of development of technology, we always have that, and I don't know if you both can relate to that, we always have that aspect of technology has to be seen and it has to be useful. And for me as a coach, I look at the data that Jana just talked about in terms of load management. That's the most important part for me as a coach, because it's what prevents the players from being injured and makes for better planning of the training sessions. If we supply that data to our players, they fall asleep and they don't really care. So what I'm trying to say here is there's a balance of being able to present technology in an interesting way to players, to let's say, outsiders, and then technology having to be useful for us coaches. And I think that's a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, we can only agree with that, because as a provider, you're always trying to balance that out. And in the beginning, you're thinking like, who is your main user, your power user? And we designed our technology in the beginning for coaches because they requested that kind of technology. Now, with players becoming a bit more sovereign, more asking for more authority about their data, they demand to have access. And they don't have the same kind of education and background, and therefore our user interface needs to be a bit more user-friendly in terms of the way how we present and visualize the data. And that is changing for us the requirements, so we have to kind of think about a coaching app and a player's app, because even though we all want the same in a way, we might look at the data from a different perspective. And it's also for us a big learning experience, because we originally targeted our software to be a coaching software, and now we have to be a bit more into the usability of a player, and they have not the same background. And graphics play an important role, not only numbers, but we're getting there. I think we have a good conversation here with a couple of partners that have a bit more experience with that, where you not only track like on-field performance, but also sleeping and your cycle. And here we can learn a lot from a more B2C app to be a bit more friendly towards a player's perspective.
That's also interesting, because like with women's sports, we have this cycle coming up that we don't have with men's sports. So Jana, is there also a difference in the data you're gathering from women's sports and men's sports?
Though I think in general, when it comes to sport, like for football, it's the same sport, so you will look to the same metrics, like maybe the distance, the distance in high speed zones, maybe the accelerations and decelerations, so that's very general. But where's the difference is like the menstrual cycle. So due to the hormone levels, the energy level and the performance, and also the injury risk fluctuates a lot. So here you have to have this in mind when doing load management. And so from the feedback I get from teams, the trainer staff is starting to do that, to have this in mind when planning. So here you have to find a solution to combine the performance data and also the health data and how the players feel and the different kind of phases and how intense you should train them and.
As you are one of the teams working with KINEXON, do you get feedback from the players regarding this cycle thing, for example?
We are starting to get some more feedback and getting into more depth in the topic. We do have a very subjective questionnaire that we use when it comes to sleep, health, and also the menstrual cycle. So we do have a general overview, but we haven't really connected, let's say, the data, the performance data, to the cycle. So we are working. We are working with the Charité, which is the university clinic in Berlin. They are piloting a project when it comes to that, and so. Maybe we will get into more detail using the KINEXON data as well.
Max, you told us that the women's part at KINEXON, the women's teams you support, is like 20% right now in Germany. So it already is rising or increasing. But what is KINEXON doing like to advance women's sports? Is there a team behind it or a strategy implemented?
Unfortunately, it's not 20% in Germany, it's 20% globally.
Oh, okay.
I think we still have a lot of homework to do that's getting to that point, and we see the majority of teams are really in the States, where women's sports at a college level is way more popular and on an equal level to men's sports. What we learned really was that originally when we designed our products, we always had partner teams that were men's team. So we designed the technology that is gender neutral in a way, based on the requirements from men football teams, men basketball team, men volleyball teams, which in general is not a big problem in the first place. But when you then work with women's teams, you find weak spots. For example, the hardware, like how you mount a sensor to a player, you have like a gender neutral vest, and that's not very comfortable for women to have like an additional textile on top of that. We never kind of considered the women's cycle in our analytics. We never thought about that back in the days. Thresholds that we detect, like for example, high speed running, had like thresholds for men's sports, or there was research about men's athletes doing that. So we never really adopted that or customized it to women's sports. And we found out with more women's teams applying that there was a gap. And identifying there's the huge trend that we see women's sports is rising, and we want to be like a thought leader in that. We have to change things, and that's why we established a women initiative in KINEXON, which means we have a dedicated person in our sales team, in our marketing team, in the sports science team, in our product team that really thinks about how do we need to, by design, change our products to fulfill women-specific requirements in many sports. And this is a start in 2022 that we hope that we can continue, that we not only have 20% women's team, but maybe closer to 50% in the future, even though that will not be easy.
And Jana, you're also part of this initiative, right?
Exactly, regarding the sports scientific side, yeah.
And what challenges do you also have there?
So I think a huge challenge is that in women's teams, the staff is smaller. So for example, men's teams, you have a lot of analytics persons and data science persons who really have time to work with the data, and we're like collecting a huge amount of data. So you have to have time to look at it and to work with it. So here we try to close this gap with giving them kind of nice reports, color-coded reports, dashboards, so to make it easier to interpret the data and to help the coaching staff to interpret it too. So yeah, and also to learn with the data, to work with the data. And also regarding the scientific part, as Max said, like research it's a huge topic. When you look at the threshold, the performance event detection and stuff like that, there is not much research out there. So you have some research that some VO2 max is about 10% lower in female athletes, but it's a very small amount of research out there. So I think, but it's now becoming more and more, and a lot of studies, like also Sven said, will be kicked off, and you need this kind of databases that you're able to interpret that data you're gathering.
So it's also important that we have a kind of pool of money for women's sports to have this research and also to have the training for the coaches, for example. Can you maybe specify it? How much time does a coach need to be able to understand and interpret the data?
Yeah, I have to smile about the question a little bit, because I think when it comes to the depth that's possible to work with the data, it's almost unlimited. And I wouldn't say we have reached like a final point or one that we are completely satisfied with, because you can get in so much detail when it comes to intensity of small games. You can get in so much intensity when it comes to defining customized speed zones and looking at how much distance the players cover in those speed zones. And we have a model that works, but we don't have one that I think fits our team perfectly. And it's also hard because when I first started to think about different speed zones, I looked at the Bundesliga data. I think you even supplied it to me. And we don't really know how far off we are from that, how much we should lower the standards, or if we should lower them at all. So there's a little bit of work and adjustment that we still have to do. And I think we can get into even more details when it comes to, let's say, something like accelerations and decelerations may be linked to the cycle. Is it good to limit decelerations, which can be a major factor of injuries, for example, in training design, and then analyzing our training sessions and seeing, okay, maybe we have too many of those at the wrong time of the week or the season. So Yeah, those are just a few of the ideas that are in my mind. So I think there's almost no limits to what we can do with the data.
But it seems like you need to be very into the topic, and it's not easy like to just jump on the job and be very fast in working with this.
Yeah, it's not always easy in, let's say, the daily routine to take the time to develop those ideas. So from my experience, which is only this season, working with the KINEXON data, there are always moments, weeks where I do find something or we find something that we have to work on, that we have to go into more detail with. And in other weeks, let's say we just manage the data and look at the things that we know are important and that we understand completely already. So it's always a change, a working process of sometimes taking more time to develop an idea further, and sometimes focusing on other things, because since we don't have, as you alluded to, multiple analysts that just focus on the data, it's something that we do as the coaching staff, while we also have to manage the players, manage the rest of the coaching staff, and prepare and conclude training sessions. So
added to the normal job.
Exactly.
Just on top. And that's also a huge difference to like men's sports, because like in men's football we have data analysts and just persons like very focused on that topic and not need to balance out all the other things. Max, maybe from a business perspective, how do you think is this changing now in women's sport also, like the investment?
With the increasing amount of teams that we gain, we see that there is an increasing amount of budget that is allocating to technology. That's a trend that we see, but we also see that this is very early times when it comes to European football, European women football. I don't know exactly, but I think England and France, they're a bit ahead of us when it comes to this, but we clearly see the trend. And what we can do is we can try to help out with that by building educational pieces that are easy to access. So from our side, help out with onboarding in the beginning, having like easy e-learning tutorials on that, and maybe hope that the society of athletic coaches in women's sports is very collaborative and the community can learn from each other. Because what we see is that every team normally needs a season to fully understand how they can benefit from a technology, because there are like daily routines where you can just have quick wins on a daily basis, where you can use it for individualized programming for individual players, and then you have like analyzing long-term effects and seeing like analyzing why did we have maybe a weak November in terms of performance. That takes time, and when do you have time to do that? And learning from your peers and counterparts can help you, especially in the beginning when there's not a lot of evidence, as Jana said, because we don't have like decades of research or interesting case studies how teams have worked in the matter of women football. So we have to be a bit more creative and think about education, building communities, and also working on our software to be easy and accessible for coaches so that they don't need to invest a lot of time on a daily basis for that.
And now we talked a lot about football. Jana, do you maybe have also an overview of different kind of sports and how the development and level of professionalization regarding technologies is there?
Yeah, so as Max said in the beginning, like regarding the US, there's basketball, also regarding also the college side, it's a huge topic there, and I think they're working a lot with technology. When it comes to the European market, also handball and volleyball is starting to do it. There are some European teams working a lot with the data, but I think here, especially when you look into the German market, it's also like a financial and also again the staff problem that the other sports like handball is too kind of small, and it's starting, and there are more studies coming, and yeah, we are also here trying to close the gap and to help them with the data, and also to do some kind of the educational part to show them what benefits this data have. Maybe they have some time saving at the end by using the data, because it makes the planning easier, or makes finding the weak spot whatsoever faster.
And in what way does it help if a women's team is connected to a men's team as well? I mean, that's already another example from football, but Union Berlin is in the German Bundesliga, like the men's team. Your women's team is in the 3rd division now. Do you think this has an impact?
I think it makes a lot of things easier. The most obvious and also impactful, in my opinion, is if we look at the recent development in the Bundesliga, a lot of men's Bundesliga teams started paying more attention and investing more into their women teams, and teams like Bayern Munich, Frankfurt, who did like an in-between thing of let's say buying into a team that already existed, but professionalizing it in a way closer to what the men's team is doing, and also other teams that try to follow up. An example from our region, a team that's, let's say, a few years in front of us is Leipzig. They are in the 2nd league now. They really want to go up to the Bundesliga, and the resources, but also all the infrastructure when it comes to technology, when it comes to even something like knowledge. If you talk to the men's pro team, there are a lot of processes in place that just make things easier and life easier for coaches on the women's side. It's no guarantee, but with, let's say, a dedicated effort for the club and some patience, I think it's a development that cannot be stopped in the women's Bundesliga, where a lot of teams, if not all, will also have a men's Bundesliga team, kind of as the, what do you want to call it, as the horse that pulls the wagon. And then the women's team benefits from that, but also at some point has to kind of step out of the, let's say, out of the shadow of the men's team and develop their own culture, their own identity. And I think the good teams are starting to do that. When you look at Wolfsburg, Bayern Munich, and so on. And that's also a path that we want to go. But we're a few years behind that. But as I said, with patience, hard work, and effort, I think others have shown us the way, and we just have to follow it and adjust where we have to maybe do things differently a little bit.
But I'm sure it will work out. And Max, another question, because you already mentioned it, that, for example, in Europe, we have England, we have Spain, a little bit ahead of Germany, and you also mentioned the US. So what do you think, which processes do we need to take as a good example of these countries to also advance in Germany and to get these teams up?
One thing that we really can learn from the States is the level of communities. I think that there are always conferences where athletic directors of colleges gather together and share their experiences. And that is something that we do not see that much in Germany. I think there are some smaller working groups already existing, but I think especially like the exchange of ideas and not being so protective about your identity and having like an openness to really talk about what are your problems, how are you dealing with that, which I personally believe are not really a pure competitive advantage, but rather like information that you could share where everyone could learn, is an important driver of innovation and compliance and usage in the US ecosystem, where we just see that this is very normal and there's not so much German angst or any kind of, they are afraid that someone will steal the idea about that. So I think if we can work on that, that would definitely help a lot. And other than that, I think it's also about being open to integrate innovation and new ideas. I'm pretty confident that in 5 to 6 years we will have maybe not every third league team, but close to that using that kind of technology. And it just takes some time. And sometimes it looks like that in Germany we need a bit more time when it comes to innovation than in some other countries. And we need to work on that, how we can change that by setting great examples and talk about that and invite people to join that kind of movement or trend and helping them out and addressing those needs to really lower the hurdles to overcome those challenges, that not having the time, not having the budget allocated, maybe not having the understanding how that can help you on a daily basis. And here we have also an obligation to help that community to come to the same level as we have maybe in the UK or in the US.
Jana, from a sports scientist perspective, how do you think is this comparison between Germany and the other countries?
Oh, good question. So as I said, I think, as Max said, Germany's a little bit, slower sometimes. So I think also regarding research, there are great researchers out there in the big universities in like kind of Australia, the US, the UK. So I think we can learn a lot from that. But as Sven also said, with the example of the Charité in Berlin, I think a lot of studies will also be kicked off also regarding the women's topics here in Germany in the next years. So I think there is a lot to come.
So there's also to define new standards maybe in women's football, and maybe we can conclude also with these thoughts, your thoughts on this topic. Sven, for example, what are your thoughts on the new standard in women's sport?
That's a really good question, and I have to, from my coaching perspective, answer not only in regards to technology. I think a standard has to be that women's football has to be seen as something with an own identity and not as, let's say, the smaller brother or sister of men's football, because there are so many, and that's something that I find really interesting as a coach. There are so many great things about women's soccer that are not as present in men's soccer or football. And one thing is you rarely see unfair play, and you see a lot of support from players. You see less, let's say, tasteless competitiveness. You see a lot of friendship, value, companionship, and I think that's something that has to be seen for spectators, that has to be seen in the public, in the media, and also that maybe I've been on a lot of football pitches where people talk about, oh, it's slower, it's like, under 15 boys teams could beat a women's team, and that's completely the wrong way to think about it. And we have to stop comparing, and we have to, as I said, develop this own identity, which I think is good and beautiful in its own. And in order to do that, I think there has to be, on the technology side, there should be no difference, and we have to work on using technology in the best way to support female athletes when it comes to the cycle, when it comes to thresholds which really indicate a top performance. So we have to, and I think that's the direction we're heading towards anyway, but we have to get better at using technology to best support female athletes and women's football in general.
And I think the hype from the Euro this year, it really helped. But Jana, what do you think is left from this hype right now?
I think it there is something left. I think more and more people are into it, and are now also like from the fan perspective are like interested in the women's football. And also I think the teams are thinking about what can we do to like keep this hype up and to step out and to, like Sven said, maybe building our own basis when it comes also to data, so that we don't have to compare, that we have our own basis where we can interpret data and thresholds and stuff like that. And I think the tech part is a great part there, because in my opinion it should be like standard as it is in all the men's team, that all women's teams have the chance to use those kind of technology to find the key performance indicators and to perform at their best. So to have the same possibilities because at the same professional level as men's teams have. Yeah.
And Max, what do you think can we expect the upcoming years from a business perspective?
From a KINEXON perspective, we have the clear goal that next year we equip 250 women's teams, which is an enormous growth that we're trying to achieve. And that's why we really kick off this women initiative and trying to help with partners, universities, researchers, partner teams that we work with, but also technology partners like AWS, to really gather like a group of people who really want to make this happen and build like a wave of excitement for that and help out to push the whole ecosystem to a new level. And what we can definitely expect, that I sense in women's sport, is that players will play a tremendous role. I think they're way more demanding in terms of technology than men's are. They want to understand, they realize early on that they have to take care about their career, that it might be not that they can live from all the earnings that they gain as a player, but there is a life after being a professional player, and then being also in control of things like my health and my body. And that's why I truly believe that players will play a very important role in the rise of technology in women's sports.
I would like to add onto that, because you said the interest of most female athletes into the data and into the knowledge. That's something I can definitely confirm, and from my own experience with the players, they are very interested in the data that we supply, and even to the extent that we have an under 23 team, they become interested in the data. We have under 17 team that plays in the Bundesliga also, they become interested. So like, let's say we spread the word a little bit now, and the players are very interested. And that's also something that's special about what I was talking about, the identity. The players are they want to learn, they want to know, and also the coaching staffs, the teams, the whole ecosystem of women's football, I think, is very more open-minded maybe than men's or boys teams. And so that's something that I also share from my experience, and I think could be a good direction, and maybe it's a good ground for the goals to really kick off something in the women's side.
So to sum it up, we can say that 2022 was kind of an important year also for women's sport.
Yeah,
Jana.
for sure. Yeah, it was some kind of like a kickoff, or with the Europe Cup, the big boom whatsoever. On the fan side, also on the player side, it got more attention. And when you get more attention, you maybe also the clubs then have other or more possibilities to start to use technology, have more staff, maybe pay the players more, become more professional and stuff like that. And I think it was like some kind of a kick-off year for that.
And technologies and data also play an important role, we know it now. So thank you very much for these insights. And I hope you are with us for the next KINEXON Sports Tech Talk.